next speaker, Shivakumar ji.
Namaste, sir.
Shivakumar ji is going to talk about Rāja Dharma Parva, Danda Niti as the means of creating Yuga by Raja. Shivakumar ji is currently the director, IKS Changemakers, Indica. I'll give an introduction to Shivakumar ji. Shivakumar GV is director, Indica Guru Sadhaka Sachiva. His responsibilities focus on Indica's critical mission to cultivate leadership. He guides initiatives to serve gurus, perpetuate their legacies, enable, empower leaders committed to IKS to become influential thinkers, institution builders, and public leaders, and bolster the broader IKS ecosystem. Over the next 36 months, Shivakumar embarks on an ambitious pledge to honor and sustain the legacies of 108 living and past gurus from the 20th century. His efforts will focus on organizing, making accessible, and cultivating a parampara that highlights their significant contributions to our civilization. As an IKS research scholar, Shivakumar remains dedicated to his scholarly pursuits in Itihasa Puranas and Indian knowledge systems. His work includes developing contemporary frameworks based on IKS principles with a special focus on the Mahābhārata and Purushartha. He has been a prolific contributor to Indica today, sharing his insights and knowledge with both academic and general agencies. He has delivered several storytelling and courses on Mahābhārata, Purushartha, Indic civilization studies for aspiring leaders and students. He is the curator of Arya, an anthology of Vedic studies, a collection of 10 stories on 10 Vedic women by 10 authors published by Indica. Shivakumar holds an MTech in Computer Science from IIT Bombay and a BE from the National Institute of Technology, Surat. With 25 years of experience in IT industry, his expertise spans theoretical computer science, algorithms, and learning system design. Shivakumar resides in Bengaluru with his family and is a devoted follower of river goddess Saraswati. Over to you, Shivakumar.
Dhanyawad, sir. Namaste, everybody. Today, I'm going to talk about a specific section in Mahābhārata, which is in Śānti Parva, and which is in a sub-parva of Śānti Parva called Rāja Dharma Parva. And there also 2 chapters will be my focus. As anybody with an insight into Mahābhārata is aware, the Śānti Parva is the biggest parva of Mahābhārata, and it's followed by Anushasana Parva. Together they form a very large chunk of Mahābhārata. And Śānti Parva contains Rāja Dharma Parva and then Moksha Dharma Parva. And a significant concern of Mahābhārata is Rāja Dharma, which is initially described as a series of, as a larger story and story within stories and so on and so forth. The epic nature of the narrative of Mahābhārata, which is followed by Śānti Parva, where there is a beautiful conversation between Bhīṣma and Yudhishthira. And Yudhishthira asks Bhīṣma to be taught about Rāja Dharma, and then the conversation results in a series of chapters. Here, there is a lot of theoretical focus, conceptual focus, emphasis, whereas the same is translated as metaphors and literary narrative in the stories. Even Śānti Parva also has a lot of stories, especially of the past. The past is before the Kauravas and Pandavas, and even before Bhīṣma. Bhīṣma himself refers to a lot of stories from the past. So in fact, the entire past is weaved into the larger story of Mahābhārata. So we will focus on specific chapters, and I'll explain which are the chapters and what is the reason for this focus? As that my title says, uh, an emphasis on certain aspect of Danda Niti and its relationship with Yuga and the king. That is the focus of this small presentation. Next slide, please. So in this conversation, in this presentation, we will see a focus on the conversation between Bhīṣma and Yudhishthira in the 20 chapters of 56 to 75, whereas the presentation itself will focus on Rāja Dharma Parva, 56th chapter and 69th chapter. And what comes between is somewhat an elaboration of the 56th chapter. 56th chapter gets, specific aspects get elaborated. In these chapters, the emphasis is different responsibilities of a king and different kinds of dharma that the king must protect, the nature of the Saptanga state. So it is no surprise that what is elaborated in Arthashastra, the seeds of it is in Mahābhārata, which also refers to Brihaspati Niti and so on. So in fact, in these chapters, Bhīṣma says, hey Yudhishthira, this is how Brihaspati explains. This is how Shukra explains. So those shlokas are also kind of either re-narrated or referred to in these chapters. But certainly what comes out as an elaborate exposition in Arthashastra, you can see all of that in different ways in the Rāja Dharma Parva. Then we will just briefly touch Saptanga. The objective is not to explain Saptanga because we have already seen in the last 2 days there is elaborate explanation of Saptanga. We will touch upon a discourse on Danda Niti, That's what we will do, not elaboration, because already Arthashastra folks have done it. The purpose of Danda Niti. So that is where these two chapters are very interesting. And the king as the creator of times. So there are 7-8 concepts whose relationship are explained as a function of king, that is a leader. A king here has to be imagined as a leader and nothing else. So because whatever is told of a king is very much applicable to the leader of an institution, because here it is about governance and leadership, and hence to every modern institution, including public institutions, this applies. So our focus is 56 and 69, and especially the relationship between the king, Danda Niti, and time, which is referred to in the form of a Yuga, and in that an element of Purushartha. That is the emphasis of this presentation. Next slide, please. So the 56th chapter, 4th shloka is interesting. This is a shloka that Yudhishthira is saying this. He is asking Bhīṣma, hey Bhīṣma, Trivargo hi samasakto Rāja Dharmeshu Kaurava. Kaurava is a reference to Bhīṣma here, not Yudhishthira. Moksha dharmascha vispashtaha sakalotra samahitaha. So he says that, hey Bhīṣma, in Rāja Dharma, they say the Trivarga, that is Dharmartha Kāma, are embedded of the world. Even the Moksha Dharma, they say, is within the Rāja Dharma. Such Rāja Dharma, can you please explain this Rāja Dharma to me? So this is the emphasis given to Rāja Dharma, that it is a Purushartha Sadhaka. That is, it is the holder of the Purushartha of not just the king, but of the state, which is the people of the state. So Rāja Dharma must ensure a very good pursuit of Purushartha for everybody. That is the objective of Rāja Dharma. Such a Rāja Dharma, Bhīṣma, you please explain. Next slide, please. So then in the 12th shloka, Bhīṣma says, Adadeva Kurushrestha Rajna Ranjana Kamya. This actually Dr. Nagaraj Garu mentioned in the morning today. Devatanam Dvijanancha Vartitavyam Yathavidhi. So what he says is that Raja's primary responsibility is Ranjana of the Praja. And Ranjana here is not so much an entertainment. Yeah, entertainment is also part of it, but to have them in a pleasant state. So basically that is to ensure that that's another way of saying it is Purushartha. And we will come to that why. Okay. So this another statement he makes is very interesting, that hence in order to keep the Praja in the Ranjana state, hence the Raja must engage with the Devatas, or the should worship the Devatas for that, invoke the Devatas for that, and the Brahmanas, and consult the Brahmanas according to the Shastra Vidhi. But the purpose is to keep the people in the Ranjana state. So this is an important shloka because it establishes the purpose of Rajas invoking the Devatas and Rajas working with the Brahmanas according to the Shastras. It is not an independent activity, but it is for this purpose. And he says, Utthanena Sadaputra Prayatetha Yudhishthira Na Hyuttanamrite Daivam Rajnyamartha Prasadaye. So the king must strive here. Utthana in the Gita Gorakhpur Mahābhārata is represented as Purushartha. That is, Utthana is that which rises you from the Artha Kāma to Dharma Moksha. That is the Purushartha. The king must always strive for it. So Ranjana is also associated with that. And he says that without the Purushartha, that is, without that, Nahyuthanam Rite, so he says, only Prarabdha is left, and that will not be good. So Prarabdha is from the past and Purushartha is to move forward. So that is the Rāja Dharma. Next slide, please. Sadha, previous slide. So then the next slide, again, it gets elaborated. I will not read the shloka. Prarabdha and Purushartha are both deemed as instruments for realization. That is, you cannot ignore the Prarabdha, you have to deal with it. But Purushartha is the way you deal with it. And Bhīṣma says, if I have to choose between the two, then it is Paurusha, that is Purushartha. Again, Paurusha is represented as Purushartha in the Gita Gorakhpur version of Mahābhārata. So, I will choose Paurusha, Bhīṣma says. That is more important. And Raja has to keep that in mind. And he also says that nothing is more important than the pursuit of truth. So Satya and Purushartha are extremely important because Rāja Dharma anchors on this. Without truth, a Purushartha cannot be established. And because for both Ihaloka and Paraloka, that is Purushartha, pursuit of truth is extremely important. Next slide, please. So then he goes on to establish the attributes of a Raja in order to achieve Purushartha. And there the critical thing is control over mind, control over senses, self-restraint. This comes through repeatedly. There are multiple shlokas that appear. And all of this is, related to the final point that I'm going to make. So these are all, associated angas of the larger presentation. So without self-mastery, the one dimension of the Rāja Dharma will be lost. There is no larger good of the state that Raja can achieve. And that larger good means what we will see, which is Purushartha, which is, the self-mastery is extremely important. Full of virtues, full of Shila, control over minds, and so on and so forth. Next slide, please. So, the attributes of a Raja are victory over mind and victory over enemies. That is Antar Vijaya and Bahir Vijaya. Both are important. So it's clearly stated that the Bahir Vijaya is not possible without the Antar Vijaya. And Antar Vijaya is the victory over mind. And victory over mind is nothing but victory over senses. So a neat argument exposition presented for a king, attributes of a king. Thus, one with victory over senses will gain. It's the rhetoric, one may or may not gain, but it is without the victory over senses. It is not possible to gain victory over enemies. So that comes out in multiple shlokas and have represented 2 shlokas. Now we have moved to the 69th chapter. So far we were in the 56th chapter. So 56th chapter, it's an emphasis on Purushartha and the Trivargas that comes. And now we have moved to the self-mastery related attributes of a king. So that's some very nice verses. Etavan Atma Vijayaha Panchavarga Vinigraha. So lot of vargas, Panchavargas, Trivargas, all that will explain it in one of the next slides. Jitendriyo Narapatir Badhitam. I think we moved. Jitendriya. So this word again, will keep on coming repeatedly. So he has to be a Jitendriya. Next slide, please. So now the kind of vargas that the king must be engaged with, that will come. Shadgunyancha trivargancha trivarga paramam tatha yovetti purusha vyaghra sabhunkte prithvi mimam. So here, Bhīṣma says, one must be well versed with Shadgunya, which is part of Artha Shastra, which is already explained, how to deal with enemies and what is a sandhi that you have to do and all this stuff. But there are 2 interesting elements. Apart from Shadgunya, Trivargancha Trivarga Paramam Tatha. So this is interesting. So there are Trivargas twice invoked over here. That is the key for this presentation. He says that apart from Shadgunya, the Raja must be well versed with 2 other things. One is the Samanya Trivarga, and Samanya Trivarga is explained in the next shloka, very next shloka, as Kshaya, Sthana and Vriddhi. This is nothing but Srishti Sthiti Laya. That is, things will go down, things will remain the same in the right dynamic, and things will Vriddhi, it will increase. So a king must be able to deal with all this. The Trivargas that we know, Dharma, Artha, Kāma, are here referred to as Parama Trivargas. That is the universal Trivarga. So thus, there is always a Trivarga for every segment of the society, which is exclusive to it. And then there is, Parama Trivarga, which is Dharma, Artha, Kāma, as you can see, in the next 2 shlokas. Trivargaschapi yah proktaha tamihaikamana shrunu Kshayah sthanancha vriddhischa trivargaha paramastata tatha. That is the Samanya Trivarga. The Paramatrivargas are Dharmarcharthascha Kāmascha Sevitavyotha Kalataha Dharmena cha Mahipalanchiram Palayate Mahim. So both the Trivargas are called here. So it's important that the king is well versed in both of them. So his primary purpose is this. So it is to deal with Kshaya Sthana Vriddhi and to have the right perspective of Dharma, Artha, Kāma, right fulfillment of that. So that is called out in this. So Rāja Dharma is associated with these 2 Trivargas apart from Shadgunya. So Shadgunya, etc. is for the purpose of these 2. Shadgunya is an instrument. Purpose is the Trivargas. Next. So then lot of shlokas on which are explicitly say that the Danda Niti, which is already explained by all our other Niti, other presentations and Arthashastra presentations, Danda Niti exists for Trivargas. And he says that the Mula of Danda Niti and Trivarga is these elements. That is Bhargavangirasa Karma. Bhargavangirasa Karma means the entire tradition of rituals and spirituality and karma that has come, one from the lineage of the Bhrigu Maharshi, so Bhrigu, and the other is the lineage of Angirasa, because they form 2 significant dhara of Sanatana Dharma. That is our Mula, Shodashanga Bala, Visha, Maya, Daiva, all of you know it is explained already. And Purushartha. These six, the Mula is in Trivarga and Danda Niti. So here the linkage is very clearly established that Trivarga, the Danda Niti of the purpose of the Danda Niti of Raja, and it's linked to Trivargas, Dharmartha Kāma. And from the first shloka of Yudhishthira, it is very clear that the moksha is, and the unstatedly part of that entire thing. Next slide, please. So again, the self-mastery being explained in a greater detail in the 76th and the 83rd shlokas. So victory over 5 enemies, victory over 5 senses, victory over 10 doshas from Kāma. So every Arishad Varga or the 6 Shadripus that we call, each of them result in 10 doshas. The Lobha, Kāma results in 10 doshas. Lobha results in 8 doshas, which is present in the next slide. I will want to skip over that for want of time, but it is, it's explicitly called out. And the Jnana of Trivargas, Dharma, Artha, Kāma, Utsaha, Utsaha Shakti, Prabhu Shakti, Mantra Shakti, which is nothing but Ichha Shakti, Jnana Shakti, Kriya Shakti equivalent. And the Jnana of Dasha Vargas, that is the 5 Vargas of mine and of the king himself and the 5 Vargas of enemies. All of that he should know. What are that we will see. That's all part of Arthashastra. So key enemy here is self-mastery is a part of it. Purpose, the Trivargas are a part of it. And the statecraft, the Dashavargas, are a part of it. So it's a holistic scheme of representation. Once again, it is repeated that with the ashraya of the Daiva, with the ashraya of your own Paurusha, which is Purushartha, and with the ashraya of Trivarga, that is for everybody, Dharmartha Kāma. So Devata, self, and the complete Bhuta, the complete state. With the ashraya of these 3, you have to invoke the blessings of Brahmanas and Devatas for your purpose. So the scheme of operation is very well laid out. Next slide, please. So this is, I'll just hold this slide. Whatever I refer to, the Shadvarga, Kāma, Krodha, Lobha, Moha, Mada, Matsarya, Panchavarga of senses, that is the 5 senses that we all know. They, touch and the ear and the eyes and all that. Then the 10 doshas from Kāma are represented: hawking, gambling, sleeping in the day. So desire leads to certain doshas. Krodha, anger leads to certain doshas. Excessive sahasa, excessive, droha, irshya, dushana. All these are, krodha related doshas. So king has to be away from all this, has to have complete victory. And the king has to be a master of Dashavarga. That is, he should have complete knowledge of his mantri, Rashtra, Durga, Kosha, Danda, and of the enemies. He needs to have knowledge. So the scheme of, platform on which the king has to operate is very clear. What all this leads to, what all this Danda Niti leads to, that we will see now. Next slide, please. So here is the crux of the presentation. This is the important part of the presentation. Often what happens is that in our texts, there is a huge elaboration and exposition of the structure. A huge elaboration on what must one do, what must one observe, etc. Then there is also a section on what will be the outcomes. Fundamentally, the outcome is extremely important. The first principle comes from there. The craft and the operations and the structure are all aligned with that. So when you have a strong focus on the outcome, then you will look at the structure and the operations as enablers of that, as not a purpose in itself. If this is not being enabled by all the craft and by all the structure, then it does not serve any purpose. So the outcome of Danda Niti. What is the outcome of Danda Niti? all varnas are following their swadharma. So in the past, it was, the varna of an individual was the varna of the community. So here we have a complex situation. So we have, people's their own swadharma. So, sometimes it is the institutional swadharma. That is, if somebody is a police officer, one has a swadharma. So the swadharma of the institution and swabhava of the individual being enabled is the purpose of Danda Niti. If that's not enabled, then the Danda Niti has failed. Similarly, avoidance of adharma. If people are able to avoid adharma, then the Danda Niti is successful. If they are in their swakarma, that is, if they don't feel like crossing the boundary of their swakarma, my role, then the Danda Niti is successful. So it's not that you're punishing the boundary being crossed, but the existence of the punishment should ensure that everybody is within their own boundary in a natural manner. That is the purpose of the Danda Niti. So being within the boundary of their maryada, knowing that boundary of maryada, even if nobody has written that line of maryada around them, being able to see it all by themselves when nobody has written that line is the purpose of Danda Niti. A good Danda Niti, a good king is that who establishes that Danda Niti, where everybody is in their swadharma, avoiding adharma, comfortable and happy in their swakarma. At the same time, they're fearlessly doing it. If the fear factor is there, then that has reduced the effectiveness of Danda Niti. So thus, Danda Niti is not about creating a fear. Fear also has to be there. But they are operating in the higher planes of Sama is the purpose of Danda Niti. Not just this. Living skillfully, Kushala Purvaka, that is also an important dimension. So fulfillment comes from being able to live with Kaushalya. That is the purpose of Danda. Of course, protection of health, security. This is nothing but Purushartha. Purushartha is this. And that's how the linkages exist. Danda Niti hi swadharmesh chaturvarnyam niyachati prayukta swamita swaga samyak dharmebhyo niyachati. Chaturvarnye swakarmaste maryadana sankare Danda Niti krite ksheme prajanam kruto bhaye. स्वाम्ये प्रयत्नं कुर्वन्ति त्रयो वर्णा यथाविधि तस्मादेव मनुष्याणां सुखं विद्धि समाहितम्. This is sukha. This is the definition of sukha. This is the most important. These three shlokas actually throw light on everything else. What must happen? A king's Shadgunya ability must result in this. Only then that has been a success. So the knowledge that you have, it has a purpose. The structure that you are establishing for an institution has a purpose. The pursuit and your own self-mastery also has a pursuit. Your self-mastery has to flow into the larger. That's why the first shloka says Dharmartha Kama Moksha. Being enabled by Rāja Dharma. For that, Rāja Dharma is important. I've heard how. This is the response of Bhīṣma towards the same. So this is the crux of this presentation actually lies in this slide. And after this, the Yuga part comes. And so we shall now proceed. This is 76th shloka, 77th shloka, and the 78th shloka of the 69th chapter. Next slide, please. So now comes the, this is a famous shloka, but this is there in this chapter. And while every shloka, by the virtue of it being in the form of a sutra, gains some independence. So it is independently, it has value in terms of meaning. But when you read a shloka in the context in which it is presented, then, the real strength of the shloka becomes evident. So this shloka Kalo va karanam rajnyo, raja va kalakaranam. Iti te samshayo mabhut raja kalasya karanam. This is the 79th shloka. So, Bhīṣma says, Yudhishthira, please don't be in a doubt. Don't be in a samshaya. Is Kala responsible for Raja? Or, Raja is responsible for Kala. That means, is Kala time creating the king, or is the king creating the time? So this is a very crucial, point in Duvidha. Raja is one of those who remains within the time and outside. Raja is, of course, a product of his times, but every Raja has that space, or every leader has that space by the virtue of coming into that position. The time propels somebody to the position, but once the person has entered the position, he or she is in a position to propel the time itself. That is the perspective of Indian tradition. So here he says, let there be no doubt. It is Raja who is the reason or the cause for Kala. So Raja must assume that freedom. Raja must assume that responsibility. Raja must assume that accountability. And here it is both Raja and leader of any institution. That's what it means by Raja. So this is an important wisdom that is accorded. A Raja or a king or leader cannot be helpless. He or she has to assume that distinction of being able to raise above time and alter the course of time and fix problems within time by going outside of time. So that is a very important thing. So that has always been the expectation of our society. That has always been the pursuit of every leader or a king to be able to rise above and shape time in a totally different direction. So he says in a later shloka, in the 98th shloka, which I am presenting earlier, he says, Bhīṣma says, Raja Kritayuga Trishta Tretaya Dvaparasya cha Yugasya cha Chaturthasya Raja Bhavati Karanam. Raja becomes the reason. He is the reason, or he creates it. Bhavati means is, but is also here used in the sense of, he creates it. Raja is the reason why we will have the 4 yugas. So Raja Kalasya Karana means, what does that mean? It's elaborated that it is he creates one of the 4 yugas. He either through his actions creates Krita or Treta or Dwapara or Kali. That is the expectation. So Raja has no other option. If he is not having the ambition of creating Krita, he will definitely end up creating Kali, which is by default. He or she has to rise above, collapsing into the Kali Yuga. He becomes the reason and he creates. Next slide, please. So now a lot of beautiful poetic rhetorical elaboration. Kritasya karanam raja Swargam atyantam ashnute, Tretayah karanam raja, Swargam natyantam ashnute. This means that if he creates Satyayuga or the Krita Yuga, then he goes to Akshaya Swarga. That is, he goes to a Swarga that does not kshaya at all, that does not diminish at all. But if he creates Treta, then he goes to a Swarga which diminishes. The nature of the Swarga itself diminishes. But Pravartanat Dvaparasya Yathabhagam Upashnute, which means if he creates Dvapara Yuga, then he goes to this Varga and enjoys it only for the amount of punya that he has gained. So which means he'll definitely come down and faster. What happens when the king creates Kali Yuga? Kaleh Pravartanad Raja Papamatyanta Mashnute. So in the next sloka, he says that he acquires, in this sloka, it says he acquires a lot of papa, and in the next sloka, he clears his Naraka is guaranteed for such a king. So the basic, expectation placed on a leader is that there is a constant need to rise above, collapsing into the disorder of Kali Yuga. Next slide, please. So now the relationship between Danda Niti and Yugas explicitly called out that Danda Nityam yada Raja samyak katsnyena vartate tada kritayugam nama kalasrishtam pravartate. When the king applies Danda Niti completely and appropriately, it results in Kritayuga. However, when the king applies Danda Niti only in 3/4 of the 4, it results in Treta Yuga. Danda Nityam yada Raja त्रीनंशान अनुवर्तते चतुर्थमंशं मृत्सृज्य tata treta pravartate. So that's, it means that slipping of a quarter is obviously very natural, and it results in Treta Yuga. Next slide, please. So it now goes on to explain what happens when you ignore 2 parts out of 4, then it becomes Dwapara Yuga. Artham tyaktva yada raja nityardham anuvartate tatastu dvaparam nama sakala sampravartate. That is, when half of the capacity only is of Danda Niti is utilized. So here it is important to know that it applies to both Yuga and to Danda Niti. So if you are not implementing the framework of Danda Niti in letter and spirit, half of it, then it results in Dwapara. What is that half is not called out. That is obviously left to the imagination of the leader. But there has to be that sense of imagination, and that responsibility itself is placed on the king to be able to see that, to what extent one is applying the full spirit of Danda Niti. So Danda Nitim parityajya. So if he gives up, if 3/4 are not done, it's almost give up. That's what it's, there is an equatic between 3/4 and 0. Then Kali Yuga happens. Next slide, please. It's the last 2 slides. So Danda Niti and its outcomes. So lokasya simantakari maryada lokabhavini samyang niti dandanitir yatha mata yatha pita. So this says that the right application of Danda Niti results in a king taking care of the kingdom just as parents taking care of young children. So fundamentally it is, that's why it's Praja Palana, and that's why Danda Niti ought not to be mistaken with mere, execution of punishment. It is all the attributes that we have so far described are akin to parents taking care of their children. So even punishment, a parent punishes a kid not with with vengeance, but with a sense of course correction. And the parent intuitively knows that. Nobody needs to teach the parent. Nobody needs to measure it. There is no measurement required of a parent's punishment, for a kid. And that happens because the parents think of the children as their own, it's part of their conscience and heart and emotion and everything. Thus, the king has to live like that for the entire state. And that is possible only when there is extraordinary self-mastery and of course statecraft and of course a good jnana of Purushartha. Only the Trivarga and the Chaturvarga and all the Vargas. So that is the responsibility placed on that. So if that training and that tapascharya is not there for a king, then this is not possible. It has to result in the Yogakshema. Yogakshema pravartante. Prajanam natra samshaya. Next slide, please. So which is the last slide. So here the grand announcement comes. Yasyam bhavanti bhutani tad vidhi manujarshabha Esha eva paro dharmo yad Rāja Danda Niti man. The whole world is standing on Danda Niti, observing Danda Niti correctly. That alone is the greatest dharma of the king. Hence, Yudhishthira, take care of your subjects according to Danda Niti. Tasmat Kauravya Dharmena Praja Palaya Nitiman Evam Vrittah Praja Rakshan Swargam Jetasi Durjayam. Durjaya Swarga. Durjaya Swarga means the first Swarga, where there is no Kshaya of that Swarga at all. So we will end up creating the Krita Yuga all over again. So that is what Bhīṣma tells, Yudhishthira. So fundamentally, the Danda Niti, Saptanga, everything is established in its outcome and purpose, which is Purushartha, Yoga, Kshema of everybody. So the last slide we'll go see now. So fundamentally, this applies to any leadership in any times, including modern institutions. So the king or leader's concern is self-mastery, Indriya Vijaya, not for ego, but from the standpoint of being able to take the responsibility of Dharmartha Kama Moksha of the entire state, not just for today, but for tomorrow also. Of course, the king has to be institution, statecraft, saptanga, shadgunya, dandaniti, all that, expert, but the purpose is purushartha and swadharma. Swadharma of the individual, in the past, that of the, community, and today, of modern institutions. And the critical insight is that the purpose of Dandaniti is the vriddhi of Swadharma and Purushartha. And through Dandaniti, leader becomes the creator of Yuga. Depending upon how well the Swadharma and Purushartha are enabled, the right, Yuga gets created. If everything is happening naturally, if king has set it in such a motion that everything is happening naturally without push, then the Krita Yuga is back. And we all would have experienced Krita Yuga in small ways within an institutional context and personal contexts. Just that it doesn't hold for long. Thus, the single biggest yardstick, to measure the success of any leadership is to what extent the Trivarga/Chaturvarga of the institution and the individual are achieved, and how much people are functioning fully from within their Swadharma. That is the purpose of Dandaniti. Dhanyavad.
Thank you very much, Shivavre. This was such a well-structured, well-argued, well-analyzed, thoroughly, deeply explored talk, and well-timed also. It has come exactly within the time, leaving 3-4 minutes for even questions. Let us check if there are questions. No, after Shweta Bhatnagarji's request for sharing the slides, there is no further question in the question and answer box. Thank you. This was a wonderful talk. When it is uploaded, it is going to be useful for many, many people. And it is an unexplored topic also. What happens with Mahābhārata is the cliche topic Viduraniti finds all its publicity all over, though it's not established that all of them have correctly interpreted every verse of Viduraniti portion. But at least the name is very popular. But there are many other portions. Apart from this Śānti Parva portion, there is this Sabha Parva portion.
Beautiful it is.
During Rajasuya, there is a Narada Yudhishthira conversation also.
Yeah, it's wonderful.
It is a very long Rāja Dharma conversation. And many other such portions of Mahābhārata and many other Puranas also, they are missing attention. And the intention of this symposium itself was to go into unexplored sources, unexplored topics, and this fits the bill very well because this has not been explored so well. Thank you very much for bringing up that very good topic, unexplored topic. And when this gets publicized, it will be very useful for all those who are interested in statecraft, governance, and leadership studies.